Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think for a moment about your home, not just as a building with walls and a roof, but as sacred ground. Your home is more than a physical space. It is the breeding ground for your destiny, the incubator of your purpose, and the sanctuary of your peace. But here's a hard truth. Not everyone who knocks on your door deserves to walk through it. Some people don't come to lift you. They come to limit you. They don't enter to encourage. They enter to exploit. Today, we're going to expose the 5 dangerous people who should never be allowed past your doorstep. These are the vision killers, the energy drainers, the backstabbers, the pass keepers, and the users. If you don't guard your gates, they will sabotage what God has placed inside you. So I ask you, who have you been letting in? And more importantly, who have you been letting go? Let's dive in. First one is vision destroyer. The vision destroyer is perhaps one of the most subtly dangerous people you can allow into your life's sacred space. These individuals don't come at you with outright hostility or obvious malice that would be too easy to spot and reject. Instead, they wield their destruction through carefully crafted words that sound like wisdom, through questions disguised as concern, and through what appears on the surface to be realistic thinking. They position themselves as a voice of reason, the grounded one, who keeps dreamers from getting too carried away, when in reality they are assassins of potential sent to murder your God-given vision before it ever sees daylight. What makes the vision destroyer particularly toxic is their ability to make limitations sound logical. They'll study your dreams just enough to identify their weak points, then attack with surgical precision. That's a great idea. But have you considered how expensive it would be? Or I just worry you're not quite ready for something that big. Or the classic, maybe you should start smaller. Each comment carries the poison doubt, injected skillfully under the guise of looking out for your best interests. They traffic in what-ifs and buts, systematically dismantling your confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. After all, they're just being practical. These individuals often operate from a place of their own unhealed brokenness and unrealized dreams. When they see someone else daring to believe for more, it triggers their own buried disappointments. And rather than deal with their issues, they project their limitations onto you. Their words carry the weight of their personal failures, not any actual truth about your capabilities. The vision destroyer doesn't see possibilities. They only see obstacles, and they'll make sure you see them too. They'll remind you of every time you failed before, every reason why it might not work, every example of someone who tried something similar and didn't make it. Perhaps most insidiously, vision destroyers frequently come packaged as people who genuinely care about you, family members, longtime friends, or respected colleagues. This makes their words land with greater force and their doubts harder to shake. They'll frame their negativity as protection, their small thinking as wisdom, and their fear as prudence. Over time, if given access, they can erode your belief in yourself and your calling, not through dramatic confrontations, but through 1,000 small cuts of reasonable objections and wise caution. Their greatest damage is done gradually as you internalize their limited perspective until one day you realize you've stopped reaching for what God placed in your heart. The tragedy is that vision destroyers often believe their help. In their mind, they're saving you from disappointment, from failure, from looking foolish. They mistake their own trauma for wisdom, their own fears for protection. But whether intentional or not, the effect is the same, a slow suffocation of your divine potential. They create an environment where playing small feels safe and dreaming big feels irresponsible. Their presence in your life acts like a ceiling, capping what you believe is possible for yourself. Left unchecked, their influence can turn vibrant vision into timid hesitation, audacious faith into careful calculation, and world-changing purpose into mere survival. Recognizing these individuals requires discernment because they rarely announce themselves. They don't say, "I'm here to kill your dreams." Instead, they say, "I'm just being realistic," or "I don't want to see you get hurt." The wise understand that true friends don't clip your wings. They teach you to fly higher. Authentic supporters don't dim your light. They help you shine bright. There's a profound difference between someone who offers constructive criticism to strengthen your vision and someone who subtly undermines it under the pretense of keeping you grounded. One waters the seeds of your potential, the other salts the earth so nothing can grow. Recognizing these individuals requires discernment, because they rarely announce themselves. They don't say, I'm here to kill your dreams. Instead, they say, I'm just being realistic, or I don't want to see you get hurt. The wise understand that true friends don't clip your wings. They teach you to fly higher. Authentic supporters don't dim your light. They help you shine brighter. There's a profound difference between someone who offers constructive criticism to strengthen your vision and someone who subtly undermines it under the pretense of keeping you grounded. One waters the seeds of your potential. The other salts the earth so nothing can grow. The emotional predator operates with a vampire-like efficiency, draining your emotional reserves while leaving you feeling obligated to keep giving. These individuals don't just experience normal human neediness. They've perfected the art of emotional extraction, creating a masterful imbalance where your energy, time, and emotional labor constantly flow in their direction while receiving nothing sustaining in return. They establish themselves as perpetual victims, ensuring every conversation circles back to their endless crises, their unmet needs, their latest drama. What makes them particularly dangerous is their ability to frame this emotional theft as vulnerability, disguising their toxicity as fragility so you'll lower your defenses and keep feeding their bottomless pit of need. These predators possess an almost supernatural radar for empathetic people, sensing who will feel too guilty to set boundaries or who derives too much identity from being the strong one to stop enabling them. They weaponize your compassion, turning your greatest strengths against you. When you attempt to pull away or redirect the conversation to your own needs, they'll deploy carefully crafted guilt trips. I guess I'm just too much for people, or I thought you were different from everyone else, designed to trigger your savior complex and pull you back in. Their neediness isn't accidental. It's a calculated strategy to keep you emotionally shackled to their chaos. Over time, they train you to anticipate their emotional demands, walking on eggshells to avoid their dramatic meltdowns or passive-aggressive withdrawals of affection. Unlike healthy individuals who work through challenges and grow, emotional predators have no interest in actual solutions. Their survival depends on maintaining the status quo of endless need. They'll sabotage their own progress if it threatens their victim identity, and yours if it risks you becoming less available to them. Any attempt to suggest therapy, personal responsibility, or healthy coping mechanisms will be met with deflection, excuses, or outright hostility. They don't want tools for independence. They want permanent access to your emotional bandwidth. Their greatest fear isn't pain or struggle, but self-sufficiency, theirs or yours, because it would eliminate their excuse for perpetual neediness. Recognizing these predators requires brutal honesty, because they often cloak themselves in the language of love and friendship. The key distinction lies in the energy flow. Healthy relationships involve give and take, while predatory ones feature relentless taking disguised as vulnerability. True connection leaves both parties nourished. Emotional predation leaves one drained and the other insatiable. Protecting yourself isn't about lacking compassion. It's about refusing to let your compassion be weaponized against you. The emotional predatory will always present themselves as the exception to every boundary, the one case where justice once becomes forever. Breaking free requires the courage to believe your peace is worth protecting, even if it means disappointing someone who's grown accustomed to feeding on your energy. Wolf in sheep's clothing. This is the most dangerous kind of person to allow into your sacred spaces, because they don't come announcing their destructive intentions. They arrive bearing gifts, a sympathetic ear, flattering words, and seemingly wise counsel. At first, they appear to be exactly what you need: the supportive friend who always has time for you, the mentor who offers guidance, or the spiritual advisor who seems so discerning. They study you carefully, learning what makes you tick, what inspires you, and what keeps you up at night. They become fluent in your dreams and fears, not to help you achieve them, but to use this knowledge as leverage when the time is right. These individuals are masters of disguise, blending seamlessly into your world. They know just when to offer encouragement are meant to feign concern. The manipulation is so subtle you might mistake it for care. They'll say things like, "I'm only telling you this because I love you," before planting seeds of doubt about your relationships, your calling, or your decisions. They position themselves as your biggest cheerleader while quietly undermining your confidence in others and eventually in yourself. Like a skilled chess player, they're always thinking several moves ahead, carefully orchestrating situations to keep you dependent on their approval and vulnerable to their influence. What makes them particularly treacherous is their ability to maintain plausible deniability. If confronted, they'll act shocked and wounded, turning the tables to make you seem paranoid or ungrateful. They've built such a convincing facade that others will rush to defend them, leaving you isolated and questioning your own judgment. Their greatest power comes from our natural reluctance to believe that someone so kind, so helpful, so seemingly devoted could have ulterior motives. By the time you recognize the pattern, they've often already done significant damage, poisoning key relationships, derailing opportunities, or eroding your self-trust. The wake of their presence is filled with confusion, broken connections, and a lingering sense of betrayal that makes it harder to trust genuine people in the future. These wolves understand that the most effective lies contain kernels of truth. They'll mix just enough sincerity with their deception to make their counsel seem credible. When they criticize others to you, they'll include some accurate observations to give weight to their more malicious insinuations. When they give advice, it will sound reasonable on the surface, while subtly steering you toward choices that serve their hidden agenda. Their words are carefully crafted to appear selfless, while actually being entirely self-serving. Perhaps most disturbingly, these individuals often believe their own narratives. They've justified their behavior so thoroughly in their own minds that they can look you in the eye while betraying you and genuinely feel they're doing nothing wrong. This makes them nearly impossible to reason with or rehabilitate. The combination of charm, manipulation, and self-delusion creates a toxic package wrapped in an attractive bow, the perfect weapon to infiltrate your inner circle and wreak havoc on your peace, your progress, and your purpose. The protection against such people isn't just wisdom, but courageous discernment, the willingness to look beyond surface appearances, to trust your instincts when something feels off, and to set boundaries even when others don't understand why. It requires recognizing that not every smiling face conceals a pure heart, and that sometimes the greatest threats don't come from obvious enemies, but from those we've mistakenly welcomed as friends. The toxic historian is an emotional time traveler who refuses to live in the present, constantly dragging both of you back to moments better left in the past. These individuals have meticulously cataloged every mistake, failure, or misunderstanding, preserving them like artifacts in a museum of misery they insist on touring regularly. They don't just remember your past, they weaponize it, using yesterday's stumbles as justification for today's distrust, control, or punishment. Their conversations are littered with remember when statements that serve not as lessons learned but as life sentences, ensuring you never outgrow or overcome former versions of yourself. What makes the toxic historian particularly damaging is their distortion of history. They don't simply recall events, they reinterpret them through the lens of their grievances, adding layers of meaning and motive that never actually existed. A simple misunderstanding from 5 years ago becomes proof of your fundamental character flaws. A single poor decision transforms into an eternal pattern of behavior. They keep score in a game no one else is playing, maintaining detailed ledgers of wrongs long after reasonable people would have moved on. Their version of the past isn't just unchangeable, it's actively curated to support whatever point they need to make in the present, a flexible narrative that always casts them as the wounded party and you as the perennial offender. These individuals sabotage growth and reconciliation by refusing to allow for change or redemption. No amount of personal evolution matters because in their eyes, you remain forever defined by who you were at your worst moment. Apologies are met with skepticism, change behavior is viewed as temporary, and genuine transformation is dismissed as manipulation. The toxic historian thrives in the stagnant waters of unresolved conflict, feeding off the emotional energy of rehearsed resentment. They'll resurrect dead arguments with startling precision, quoting verbatim from conversations you barely recall, wielding words you spoke in frustration as if they were binding contracts rather than passing emotion. Their obsession with the past creates a psychological prison where both of you serve life sentences for crimes that should have been pardoned or paroled long ago. Every new disagreement becomes layered with echoes of old ones, making resolution impossible because you're never just addressing the current issue, you're battling the accumulated weight of every similar conflict that came before. The toxic historian doesn't believe in fresh starts or clean slates. They believe in eternal recurrence, where history must endlessly repeat itself because they've already decided how the story goes. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where their constant expectation of repetition actually provokes the very patterns they claim to dread. Perhaps most tragically, the toxic historian often mistakes their fixation for wisdom or discernment. They believe their refusal to forget makes them profound rather than petty, principled rather than punishing. In reality, their inability to release the past reveals not moral superiority, but emotional stagnation, a refusal to do the harder work of genuine forgiveness and moving forward. They become archivists of anger, preserving pain long after its purpose has been served, investing more energy in maintaining their grievances than in building anything meaningful in the present. Their relationships become mausoleums housing the corpses of dead conflicts rather than gardens where new understanding could grow. The toxic historian's impact extends beyond the immediate relationship, subtly training you to view yourself through the lens of your past failure. Over time, you may internalize their narrative, believing the worst versions of yourself are the truest ones. Their relentless focus on who you were can actually hinder who you're becoming, creating a psychological anchor that prevents forward movement. They'll dismiss your growth as temporary, your changes as superficial, and your progress as illusory because acknowledging your evolution would require them to surrender their favorite weapons, the carefully preserved mistakes they've been wielding against you for years. The Purpose-Blind Moocher is a master of transactional relationships, disguised as meaningful connections, approaching every interaction with a calculator rather than compassion. These individuals have an uncanny ability to sniff out resources, whether emotional, financial, or social, and will attach themselves to anyone who has something they need, all while maintaining the pretense of genuine friendship or concern. Their relationships follow a clear pattern of extraction. They appear when they require something and vanish once they've gotten it, leaving behind a trail of exhausted goodwill and depleted generosity. What makes them particularly insidious is their ability to frame their taking as your privilege. They'll make you feel special for being the one they can depend on, all while systematically draining you dry. These moochers don't just occasionally ask for help. They build entire lifestyles around exploiting the kindness of others. They've perfected the art of the perpetual crisis, always having some emergency that requires your time, money, or connection. Their problems are never ordinary, but always presented as uniquely dire situations that only you can solve. They'll appeal to your faith, your kindness, or your sense of obligation, wrapping their demands in spiritual language if necessary. God told me you're my answer to prayer, or I know you're not like those other selfish people. What begins as occasional favors escalates into an expectation where your resources become their entitlement and your generosity becomes their dependency. The purpose-blind moocher lacks any awareness of or interest in your divine assignment. They see you solely as a means to their end. While you're pouring into them, they're never pouring back. While you're helping them build, they're never helping you fulfill your purpose. Your dreams, callings, and needs remain invisible to them unless they can somehow be leveraged for their benefit. They'll keep meticulous mental records of every minor thing they've ever done for you while conveniently forgetting the mountains you've moved for them. When confronted, they'll weaponize your past kindnesses as proof of your obligation to continue. After all I've been through, how can you abandon me now? Never considering the relationships require mutual investment. These emotional and resource vampires operate with a distorted sense of reciprocity where your giving is expected but their returning is optional. They've convinced themselves that their need justifies their taking, that their temporary hardship excuses permanent leeching, what they call help, is actually enablement. Your constant rescuing prevents them from developing the resilience and responsibility required for their own growth. They don't want solutions, they want suppliers. People who will indefinitely fund their poor decisions, cushion their consequences, and maintain their comfort. Their survival depends on finding people with strong helper tendencies but weak boundaries, individuals who confuse being needed with being valued. Over time, the purpose-blind moocher doesn't just take your resources, they reshape your understanding of healthy relationships. You start believing this lopsided dynamic is normal, that giving without receiving is noble rather than destructive. They train you to feel guilty for having needs of your own, for wanting mutuality, for expecting basic reciprocity. Your generosity becomes their entitlement, and your boundaries become personal betrayals. The more you give, the more they take, and the more resentful both parties become. You at their endless taking, and them at your eventual resistance. This toxic cycle continues until either you collapse from exhaustion or finally awaken to the realization that you've been investing in a black hole that gives no light in return. The tragedy of the purpose-blind moocher lies in their self-imposed limitations. By viewing relationships purely as avenues for getting rather than opportunities for mutual growth, they condemn themselves to perpetual immaturity. They never develop the character muscles required for true success because they're always leaning on others rather than standing on their own. Their spiritual and emotional growth remains stunted as long as they see people as ATMs rather than divine connection. Meanwhile, those they exploit find themselves constantly drained, with less energy, resources, and emotional bandwidth available for their actual God-given assignment. The moocher's blindness to purpose extends beyond ignoring yours. It includes neglecting to discover and develop their own, choosing instead to feed off the purpose energy of others rather than generate their own.